Howdy y'all, my name is Dave, this is the Anime Field Guide podcast, and you are listening to The Studio Rundown. This is my series where I take you through the history and business practices of anime production houses across Japan. Today's featured studio is the late, great Manglobe. Special thanks to Dark Cat for the theme music. This is Lover's Oasis, courtesy of Upbeat for making the song available. Thank you very much, Upbeat. Give Dark Cat some love over on Spotify as well. So Manglobe was established in 2002 by former anime producers at Sunrise. This was Shinichiro Kobayashi and Takashi Kochiyama. Kobayashi-san was the president and CEO, and these men had worked together at Sunrise on 1999's Better Man, which is a spin-off from King of Braves' Gal Gaigar. That was a Super Robot series. They worked on 2000's Brigadoon, 2001's S-Cried, directed by Goro Taniguchi, who would later go on to do Code Geass. And so Manglobe started off as being known for producing original anime, mostly off the back of their debut title, 2004's Samurai Champloo, followed by Ergo Proxy, Michiko and Hatchin, and then later Samurai Flamenco, not Samurai Champloo, Samurai Flamenco. And then they did adaptations for House of Five Leaves, Dead Man Wonderland, multiple seasons of The World God Only Knows, and finally, Gangsta. This was a short but memorable run from February 2002 through September of 2015 when the studio filed for bankruptcy and closed its doors. So Manglobe was founded on February 7th, 2002, based in Suginami, Tokyo. Their first anime, as I mentioned, is Samurai Champloo, and this is created and directed by Shinichiro Watanabe of Cowboy Bebop. He was invited by Kobayashi to collaborate and create a new anime project. Shinichiro Watanabe found himself in a unique position post-Bebop. Essentially, off the success of that show, he had carte blanche to make whatever he wanted. And he'd actually began the concept planning for Champloo as far back as 1999, but the actual project was delayed due to his work on segments for the Animatrix with Studio 4C, so Watanabe did Kid's Story and then Detective Story, as well as the Cowboy Bebop movie with Studio Bones that released in 2001. As for the story of Samurai Champloo, this is first set in the Edo period, Japan. This is peak samurai. Everything samurai is almost always going to be Edo period. It's a very popular time to adapt. This show blended hip-hop with traditional samurai tropes as we follow a trio of misfits, and they are searching for a samurai who smells of sunflowers. It's a classic road trip anime with a lot of standalone episodes that inch the main plot forward. Ostensibly they will find some clue or somewhat about the sunflower samurai. There's a ton of hip-hop references. Obviously, you have some amazing sword fights and just fight choreography in general, and wacky characters wrapped in the heavy theme of facing and also accepting your own mortality. And despite a rocky first episode, Champloo was a massive hit and was also very popular on Adult Swim when it came over here to the United States. Samurai Champloo was also very popular in the home media front. This was printed multiple times, first by Geneon, then it was picked up by Funimation, who did DVD and Blu-ray runs, and there's now a recent reprint under the Crunchyroll label. And so following up this, we have 2006 Ergo Proxy. Now, this is directed by Shuko Murase, who was the character designer on Gundam Wing, and also he did character designs for Final Fantasy IX, and then he would later come back to direct Gangsta. Series composition for Ergo Proxy was by Bebop's writer Dai Sato, who also wrote episodes of Samurai Champloo. You have Ghost in the Shell Standalone Complex, Wolf's Rain, so pretty good pedigree going into this show as well. Ergo Proxy is a dystopian future science fiction in which humanity lives in these isolated dome cities, and your typical fake utopias are assisted by androids while you have a bombed out wasteland outside. However, something is infecting these androids, causing them to act out against their human masters, and it's up to Inspector Riel Mayer to uncover the truth. But in doing so, she uncovers a deeper secret that the government, the city government, wants to keep hidden at all costs. What are these mysterious beings called the Proxy, and what do they have to do with the state of the world? The answers may only be found outside. So again, this was the second outing for Manglobe with continued high-quality animation and excellent soundtrack. You also have the ending credits saying Paranoid Android by Radiohead. However, Ergo Proxy is a complex and what I call like a cerebral anime. It's had a lot of heavy psychological themes. It's not something that lends itself well to, I would say, like a casual watch or to have something on in the background. So while the show scored well critically, it was not the same story on the home video front. Although it is a show that has a consistent cult following, I am amongst them. I love this show, and I wish it had gotten more attention, but them's the breaks when you have a show like this that is asking a lot of its audience to keep track of. In 2008, we had Michiko and Hachin directorial debut for Sayo Yamamoto. She had directed several episodes of Champloo, and then she'd go on to direct Lupin III, The Woman Called Fujiko Mine, as well as Yuri on Ice. So this is set in a fictional country modeled after Brazil. We have the escaped convict Michiko Malandro, who kidnaps her daughter Hana Morenos, or Hachin, from her abusive foster parents. The story follows our unlikely duo as they look for Michiko's former lover and Hana's father, Hiroshi Morenos, while of course dodging the police. This is a much more approachable work than Ergo Proxy and has the same road trip appeal of Champloo with, following the classic tale of female empowerment. And again, it's another one that is generally well received for, again, its flashy set pieces, fun action scenes. These three anime, so Champloo, Ergo Proxy, Michiko, and Hachin. So these three anime, Champloo, Ergo Proxy, and Michiko and Hachin, these were Manglobe's first three outings and established the studio for high-quality original works. Now, they were taking on side projects and assisting on productions in the meantime, so in no particular order, you have animated cutscenes for Sengoku Basara, the 2005 PlayStation 2 game, the first in that franchise. They did in-betweens and secondary key animations across a wide number of shows, so I'm just going to mention a few. We have Aquarion, Full Metal Alchemist, the first one, Aria the animation, Eden of the East, and Persona 4 the animation. They also assisted production on Gurren Lagann, Black Butler, Book of Circus, Heroic Age, Pandora Hearts, and Toriko. Again, many more shows after that. You can find a full list on things like Anime News Network Encyclopedia. But from 2008 onwards, Manglobe would shift their focus to adaptations, beginning in 2009 with The Sacred Blacksmith. It's your light novel, typical fantasy, swords and sorceries. We follow Cecily. She's a young woman training as a knight. She meets this mysterious blacksmith named Luke, whose forbidden demon contract allows him to instantly forge battle-ready swords, namely some katana, and, they go off on an adventure, discover the world. It was a standard 12 episodes. It enjoyed a decent reputation. It was also picked up by Funimation with an uncut DVD version and a collector's edition relaunch, complete with an art book. In 2010, they adapted House of Five Leaves, the manga by Natsume Ono of Ristorante Paradiso and Aka 13. The anime was directed by Tomomi Mochizuki. So House of Five Leaves was, again, another 12 episode. It's a samurai historical drama set in the Edo period. It's a very distinct art style and color palette. It is also very heavily dialogue driven. Some really strong line work in this one. It's another show I heard good things about, but I wasn't aware of many of my friends who actually watched the show all the way through when it was airing. In spring 2011, we have Deadman Wonderland, again adapting the manga by Kazuma Kondo and Jinsei Kataoka. This is another 12-episode run that adapted roughly the first 21 chapters of the manga. The total manga run ended up being something like 57 chapters. Manglobe also animated a prequel OVA for Deadman Wonderland later in October, and that's all we ever got of Deadman Wonderland. This was one of those shows that was very popular at first on Adult Swim. When around this time, they were also bringing back the Toonami block, which would officially return in 2012. But the ending to Deadman Wonderland, the anime, was this big cliffhanger, and I remember a lot of folks asking for a season 2, especially when the final manga volume came out in Japan in August of 2013. As the years wore on, this just became a particular sore spot. People really liked this in the moment, and they thought this was a missed opportunity for Manglobe or anyone, really, to get a season 2. We've not gotten any more Deadman Wonderland since that season at the time of this recording. But in the meantime, we were getting multiple seasons of another popular manga, The World God Only Knows. This was written by Tamaki Wakaki, who's also recently finished up a new manga, 365 Days to the Wedding. This anime began in the fall season of 2010 and released new seasons every year or so until 2013. The first 2 seasons were directed by Masato Takeyanagi, who's also known for Dagashi Kashi. Then the rest of the series was picked up by Satoshi Oseda. and this is his only director credits. He's mainly an episode director and a storyboard artist. So World God Only Knows ended up being about 3 seasons plus a couple of OVAs, even like a music video. I haven't even told you what it's about yet. So this is a popular high school rom-com harem series following a guy, Kema Katsuragi, who is the ultimate dating sim gamer, able to capture the heart of any 2D girl, but he's kind of a loser in real life. He gets a mysterious email one day offering a contract to capture girls that he mistakes for a gaming challenge, but instead it's a demon contract, oh no, and now he has a buxom demon girl companion, Elsie, who they are tasked with. There's basically a bunch of runaway spirits that have hidden themselves away in the hearts of actual girls, and the only way to exercise this negative energy is for Kema to use his mad gamer skills to have each girl actually fall in love with him. And this is typically the kind of premise that I just avoid like the plague. All the red flags are going off, all the alarms are going off, but The World God Only Knows is that rare exception of don't judge a book by its cover. There is a genuine heart to this story. It does have all the trappings of a romantic comedy, but the characters at the beginning of the show are very different people by the end of the show, and everyone improves for the better. Wakaki-san, the manga author, has repeatedly and publicly praised this adaptation of his work, and even became drinking buddies with Manglobe president Kobayashi. But after the Manglobe adaptations ended in 2013, there have been no further adaptations or entries for The World God Only Knows. The second big rom-com series from Manglobe started in 2011 with Hayate the Combat Butler. Specifically, this was a spin-off film based on the main series that had been going since like 2007. So after the film, Manglobe then animated a 12-episode season subtitled Can't Take My Eyes Off You, which is mostly new material. This is leftover stuff by the original creator, Kenjiro Hata, basically bringing in ideas that were dropped from the original manga and didn't make it into the 2007 season. This story did make it into the larger canon of Combat Butler, and so at the end of it all, the 2011 entry is considered like Season 3. Manglobe then got the green light on a 4th season, which premiered in spring of 2013 as Combat Butler Cuties. But again, it's more short stories focusing on various characters. And then finally, in 2014, Manglobe produced a 3-part OVA series titled Hayate the Combat Butler 2014. This was celebrating the manga's 10th anniversary. Also in 2011, jumping back a little bit, we have Mashiro Iro Symphony, The Color of Lovers. This was adapting an 18-plus rom-com visual novel for TV audiences. This was directed by Eiji Suganama. He's got a lot of credits with the romance and ecchi genre, but he also returned for spring 2013's Carnival. So this was another 12-episode manga adaptation. This was an action thriller with a circus carnival aesthetic to its world, and also people had superpowers based on circus performing stuff. And unfortunately, Carnival and Combat Butler Cuties, these got buried because spring 2013 was the premiere of Attack on Titan. It was the premiere of The Devil is a Part-Timer, Ori-Imo, and the sequel movie for Steins Gate, just to name a couple of things. And spring 2013 was far from the exception. All through the 2010s, this new narrative of Manglobe was starting where you had this really strong start in the 2000s, and then now it's almost like the studio is stuck working on these seemingly generic rom-coms. Also, the home video market, one of their main sources of income at the time, was beginning to dry up in the rise of streaming services. Their only mass market hit was now pushing 10 years plus since release, that being Samurai Champloo. Again, The World God Only Knows was also very popular, but it wasn't quite enough to keep the studio afloat. And indeed, Manglobe was getting buried, both critically and especially financially. They were just steadily hemorrhaging money and not really sure how to turn the ship around. But in 2014, the studio bet big. This was going to be the return to original anime projects, and this was 2014's Samurai Flamenco, directed by Takahiro Oomori, who had previously directed Bakano, Durarara, Natsume's Book of Friends. This was written by Hideyuki Kurata, who was coming in from The World God Only Knows. And so Samurai Flamenco, ostensibly, this was about a guy, he's a male model, Masayoshi Hazama. He just decides one day to become a superhero, and he builds his own Iron Man suit. Hijinks ensue. His antics and identity are discovered by a police officer, Hidenori Goto, and the two end up involved in something that is way above any of their pay grades. And Samurai Flamenco was a wacky, character-driven show to its core. Again, a lot of the DNA from Bakano and Durarara was here. As far as the actual plot, Flamenco is a kind of show that kept the audience on its toes, At least that's like what I'd like to say, because said audience never really materialized in any meaningful way. Essentially, the 3-episode rule, air quotes, was not kind to this show, and by the time the really wacky stuff began to pick up, most of the viewing audience had already left. Some shows, again, these shows may get a second chance through word of mouth, but more often than not, that happens after the broadcast concludes, and a lot of the marketing potential, like the marketing window for the large part, was closed. So Samurai Flamenco, unfortunately, was a massive flop for Manglobe, plus a very limited home video release did not do this show any favors. It has been out of print for several years now and was also one of the many victims of the Funimation streaming catalog purged when all of that catalog was supposedly moved over to Crunchyroll, and then we saw over 100 shows that just vanished. And this finally brings us to 2015, Gangsta, the final production by Studio Manglobe based on the manga by Kosuke. The easiest comparison for Gangster is Black Lagoon. Gangster is set in this city full of criminals and territories being fought over by various mafia organizations. We follow 2 men called Nick and Warwick who make a living as handymen, basically taking on the dirty jobs that no one else would touch with a 10-foot pole. And in classic fashion, one day they take on a job that's supposed to be this routine day of kicking ass and explodes into a conflict that is much bigger than anyone ever bargained for. And again, the Black Lagoon comparison is apt. This is a gritty, goring setting, hard hits, hard drugs, life is cheap. Yet this was another 12-episode, one-run adaptation with an incomplete or cliffhanger ending, much in the same vein of Dead Man Wonderland. Also had many instances of rough animation or sound design. The writing would stumble throughout its runtime. And this would be like, yes, definitely was plagued by production issues. And by the time Gangsta ended its original run on September 27th, 2015, Manglobe closed its doors on September 29th. This was literally the last gasp of Studio Manglobe before closing its doors. So why did they close shop? Well, the short story is Manglobe had been operating at a loss for most of its existence, but it's not like there was a financial scandal like Gainax or this mass exodus of talent. Simply put, this is one of the many victims of the anime industry. In kind of reference to my anime production field guide, animation studios are typically paid a flat contract to produce a work, and after that, their involvement is done. No royalties. Some staff, like the series director or the head writer, some original creator, like individual staff members may get royalties depending on the contract, but again, that's to them. That doesn't filter back to the studio. And unless the studio itself has other revenue streams or maybe a member of a production committee for better leveraging on pricing, or it has, again, alternate revenue streams, the profit margins in the anime industry are incredibly tight. Again, it's the producer's job on a committee is supposed to represent their company, and they're supposed to get maximum profit for minimal investment into the work. Produce it as cheaply as possible, and then maximize the marketing to make up that cost and make a return. You can see this all over here if you think about the Hollywood special effects studio crisis. It's basically that, just even worse for anime studios, for a lot of anime studios. Now, Samurai Champloo did afford Manglobe a fair bit of initial capital thanks to licensing it out and home video sales. But again, that's the risk that you take with original projects. Yes, Manglobe owns the Samurai Champloo IP, but then you have Ergo Proxy, Michiko and Hachin, Samurai Flamenco. They didn't nearly provide the same returns to pull the studio back into the black. And so, as you would expect, as the debts kept piling up, the studio lost more and more bargaining power at the table and had to take less and less money for work. And it also meant the studio struggled to pick up consistent work while these bills kept piling up. Samurai Flamenco was also a particularly massive hit to the company at a time when they really couldn't afford to take such a hit. And so it is a sad but common story in the anime industry, with Manglobe as just one of the several studios that has been brought down by this system. It's one of the reasons why corporate mergers and studio buyouts are so common within the anime industries. It's a lot of times it's just getting bailed out and shuffled around. Essentially, if you're not a big company or affiliated with a big company, the inherent financial risk is that much greater. And so ends the story of Studio Manglobe. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Let me know what some of your favorite shows are animated by Studio Manglobe. This is the first of what I'm calling the historical anime studios. We will also have an episode in a couple of weeks on Gainax and another personal favorite of mine, A3P. So look forward to those as well. Of course, we'll be continuing on the big boys as we go through the Studio Rundown series. So let me know what studios you would like me to cover as well, historical or still currently running. And just let me know all of that in the comments. And thank you for listening. Stay safe and watch more cartoons.